Nēbiru the Primal Being is one of the most powerful hand traps in all of Yu-Gi-Oh! A classic turn-ender. Or at least it was. The hand trap seems to be in the process of slowly becoming power crept entirely, with many decks able to nearly entirely ignore the card. But what even is it? It certainly looks like just an asteroid, but the token has some sort of creature hidden in the card art, which then was turned into an alt art. We also got a spin-off dark reflection of Nēbiru in the card Thea, the Primal Being. What's going on here? Well, what if I told you Nēbiru isn't just a turn ender, but also a world ender? That's right, baby. We're about to talk about the end of the world and pseudo-history today, with a little extra dash of pseudo-astronomy too. Let's dive right in. Chapter 1. Babylonian Astronomy and the Crossing Point. So the story of Nēbiru starts some 4,000 years ago in the Akkadian Empire. The Akkadian Empire was a Sumerian successor state centered around the city of Akkad. This kingdom is where some of our earliest recorded writings were written, but because Akkadians also spoke Sumerian, these texts end up being written in a combined language that scholars refer to as Sumero-Akkadian. This is interesting to me since Sumerian is a language isolate, like the Basque language, and is in fact so separated from Akkadian that the word Sumer is actually just the Akkadian word for people who don't speak Akkadian. They would have called their land Kengir, or Country of the Noble Lords, and referred to themselves as the Sangig. Nēbiru is just a word in the Sumero-Akkadian language that translates to something like crossing or point of transition. A nexus point, if you will. I'm sure an expert in the Mesopotamian world could identify whether the origin point of Nēbiru is specifically Sumerian or Akkadian, but I haven't been able to find that kind of confirmation. Regardless, the word is used in many Mesopotamian works like the Epic of Gilgamesh. Then the Akkadian Empire declined and was superseded by the Third Dynasty of Ur, or the Neo-Sumerian Empire, which was then eclipsed by the Old Babylonian Empire, who thus spoke Akkadian as their main language and often wrote in the same Sumero-Akkadian as a purely literary language. Think of how the Roman Republic treated the Greek language, or how Nara period Japan treated the Chinese language. This term Nēbiru was thus brought forward and used in Babylonian astronomy to mark any visible astronomical object that marks an equinox. The term was also used in Babylonian religion, where it was associated with the god Marduk and was placed in parts of the sky like the Libra constellation or Jupiter. Remember, in this period, religion and science are one and the same. This terminology fell out of favor as the Akkadian and Sumerian languages died out, leaving it a footnote of the historical record. Now this is a pretty clear-cut origin point for our card, but it's certainly not the end of the journey. Nēbiru, the card, isn't a point of transition or Jupiter after all. It's clearly an asteroid or planet-sized rock that's about to collide into an Earth-like planet. I mean, I guess that's a transition of sorts, but I don't think it's the kind that the Babylonians intended. So instead, I'm going to use this as my own transition, or Nēbiru, to skip ahead to the 1900s. Beware though, we are leaving the normal stuff behind now, and entering the realm of pseudoscientists and pseudo-historians. It only gets crazier from here. Chapter 2. Percival Lowell and the Power of Imagination. In the extremely early 1900s, a businessman named Percival Lowell entered the field of astronomy. Born March 15, 1855 to a family of wealthy Massachusetts industrialists, Percival graduated from Harvard with distinction in mathematics and spent 6 years running a cotton mill, which I'm sure would have been horrifyingly abusive. Like many rich people of the era, Percival was able to do basically whatever the hell he wanted, including many travels in Asia, and especially Japan, where he solidified his idea that human progress was spurred on by imagination. That's why he decided to become an astronomer and study Mars after reading one book about the subject, despite having absolutely no credentials in the subject. Being as rich as he was, there were no barriers to him doing this, and he founded his own observatory. Now you best believe that this guy was using his imagination to make up some stuff, including the existence of canals on Mars that supported life, spokes on the surface of Venus, and irregularities in the orbit of Neptune and Uranus. These irregularities led Lowell to the conclusion that there must be an undiscovered planet, a Planet X as he called it. This mysterious planet was warping the orbit of Neptune and Uranus, explaining the irregularity. This exact line of thinking is in fact what led to the discovery of the planet Neptune, so the logic seemed sound. The only problem? He, his partner Pickering, and his observatory staff couldn't find Planet X. Nor could they find Planet O, which was Pickering's pet theory that Lowell thought was just silly. Bit of a hypocrite, that Lowell. Dozens of other scientists from around the world had also tried to find trans-Neptunian planets with various names like Hyperion, Brahma, or Hades to explain this discrepancy, but none quite fit. You have to remember that the way astronomy worked back then was very painstaking and mostly involved math and comparing nearly identical pictures. It's very difficult work. Eventually Lowell passed on, never finding Planet X nor the scientific legitimacy that he craved. But the observatory he founded did end up photographing Pluto in 1915, mistakenly believing it to be a star, and in 1930 discovering its true nature. Believing it to be the Planet X, they made the new planet's astronomical symbol out of the initials of Lowell's name, which were also the first two letters of the new planet's name, PL. So there you go, Planet X mystery solved. It was just Pluto. But wait, Pluto isn't a planet. And it turns out it's so small, it doesn't even have the gravitational pull to affect Neptune or Uranus either. What's going on here? Planet X doesn't exist. It turns out his math was just wrong, particularly where he overestimated the mass of Neptune. The rich guy who believed imagination was the most important part of human progress imagined some shit and then spent the last years of his life chasing it. At least he did a lot for promoting planetary science in the public consciousness, despite making up an entire planet of his own. Now, Planet X did make its way into pop culture as a generic name for unknown planets, particularly in our own solar system. Probably the most popular of these renditions is from the Godzilla film Invasion of the Astro Monster, where aliens from Planet X use King Ghidorah and a mind-controlled Godzilla and Rodan to try and take over the Earth. But that's a topic for my podcast, The Kaijus and the Details, available everywhere podcasts are found, and also on my other channel, Thempodian. We're here to talk about the card Nibiru, which you'll note is not named Planet X. It has its own name, Nēbiru, as you might have noted by the fact that I called it Nibiru. So we have to keep moving forward to connect Planet X and Nēbiru. That's right, being completely discredited isn't going to stop Planet X, and the next person to take up the mantle of Planet X is after a bit more than just scientific validation. Chapter 3. Zechariah Sitchin and the Anunnaki. Born July 11, 1920 to a Jewish family in Baku, Soviet Azerbaijan, Zechariah Sitchin would take Planet X to its next grift evolution. He was raised in Mandatory Palestine and would become an editor and journalist in the State of Israel after receiving an economics degree from the University of London. This is already a recipe for disaster, but we won't get to the end of the world theories until later.
Why is Jerusalem sacred?
For some reason, perhaps just the proximity to the archaeological sites, this man decided to teach himself Sumerian cuneiform. I assume this also means he studies Sumero-Akkadian, since they're so intertwined in the Mesopotamian world despite the languages not even being related. But then again, the guy can't tell the difference between Hebrew and Aramaic, so who the hell knows? The old Babylonian Empire was certainly writing in Sumero-Akkadian, where Sitchin would have found the astronomical use of the word Nēbiru, but also he could just be plain making things up.
Sometimes I'm asked to define myself in one word or one sentence, and the interviewer would ask me, are you an archaeologist, are you a biblical scholar, are you a linguist? And I'm all of that to some extent, but I would define myself as a reporter.
By the way, the old Babylonian Empire isn't the one from the Bible. That's the Neo-Babylonian Empire, which shows up on the scene about 1,000 years after the fall of the old Babylonian Empire, in case you're curious. But thus, Sitchin writes a book about his findings, based on his own personal translation of Mesopotamian cuneiform called The 12th Planet. As you might expect based on all the context I provided you up to this point, and the name, this book posits that the Sumerians knew of an undiscovered planet called Nēbiru, which he calls the 12th planet because he claims the Sumerians counted Pluto, the Sun, and the Moon as planets. This planet, which, unlike Lowell's Planet X, has a highly irregular orbit more like a comet, and its moons collided with the planet called Tiamat between Jupiter and Mars over the course of 3 cycles to form the Earth before returning to the outer solar system. And now it just comes near Earth every 3,600 years. Now, I do want to point out the fact that Jupiter's gravity likely wouldn't allow this to happen. Like, you have no idea how many larger celestial bodies Jupiter protects us from, but more importantly, there's no evidence for this claim at all. No gravitational influence on the planets, no way a planet can move far enough to not be detected by Earth instruments and back in 3,600 years, and we haven't ever detected it in all this time, which makes those first 2 debunks pretty damning. Anyways, Sitchin claims that this planet is the home of the Anunnaki, Sumerian gods that were also worshipped by the Akkadians and Babylonians, who he claimed to be ancient astronauts in the vein of Eric von Daniken's Chariot of the Gods, which came out around the same time and would be the basis for the History Channel show Ancient Aliens. He also claims that they're the Nephilim from the Bible because all of these ancient alien guys try to flatten out all of culture into one hegemony. Funnily enough, this has meant that a lot of hardcore Christians who study the ancient Levant to better understand the Bible have become the strongest haters of the ancient alien movement, since it's directly contradictory to the biblical origin of the world. Their work has actually been invaluable for the research of this video, especially the website sitchiniswrong.com, which is extremely funny to me. I'm using one branch of pseudo-history to debunk another one. Isn't that incredible? According to Sitchin's fake-ass research, the Anunnaki evolved on the planet Nibiru as it approached Earth and then began to colonize Earth to extract its resources. The beings that the Sumerians would come to know as gods were actually just menial workers of the Anunnaki Empire that genetically engineered humanity to do the resource extraction for them after they mutinied from the main society. And then they apparently had a nuclear war, and the fallout from that is the evil wind that destroyed the city of Ur in the Lament for Ur, an ancient Sumerian text. He also engages in some flood literalism and talks about some sort of glacial movement that flooded the world and killed all of humanity except for those saved, of course, by a boat, like in the several myths and the Bible and all that. The Anunnaki used their spacecraft to escape the deluge and then felt bad about letting humans die like that and gave the last humans the secret of agriculture and established kings to be middlemen between themselves and humanity. Thanks, Anunnaki, you pieces of shit. I don't want your fucking hierarchy, get out of here. Then I guess they just kind of fucked off entirely? Sitchin isn't really clear about why they leave for good. In fact, his writing isn't clear in general. It's gish gallop in written form. I had to heavily skim the book to get all this information out of it because there is so much random nonsense in here that it makes it nigh on impossible to read like an actual book. So obviously there's a lot of problems here, and if you'll indulge me, I don't get many opportunities to use my astrobiology minor I got in undergrad, so I'm going to use that and my history master's degree to disassemble some of these claims. First off, we have the obvious one. Nibiru, as Sitchin describes it, doesn't exist and can't exist, but also if a planet like that did exist, it wouldn't be able to evolve life. Earth is a very lucky planet to be able to harbor the life that it does, and one of the important parts of that is that it doesn't move out of the inner solar system, and importantly, the Goldilocks zone within this inner solar system. If you want a human-like alien species to evolve, which is highly improbable by the way, you need to have a planet which does not radically change its placement relative to the sun in a cycle of 3,600 years, which is not nearly enough time for a planet to evolve life. On the planet Earth, life developed 0.9 billion years after the formation of the planet, and then took about 3.7 billion years to evolve into something we would call human. You might also notice if you look it up that that's also how many years there are from the origin of life to the current time. The evolution of humans is so recent on an evolutionary timescale that if you simplify it to the hundreds of millions like that, the difference between the origin of our species and the present isn't even noticeable. So how the hell is a human-like species supposed to evolve on a planet and become a super advanced godlike civilization in the small amount of time that Nibiru is supposed to be in the inner solar system to get the sun's warmth? Oh, maybe they could survive without it. 1, no they can't, not if they're supposed to be human-like. And 2, okay, supposing they could somehow. They wouldn't be able to survive in the inner solar system then. There is absolutely no way life as we know it could develop on such an inconsistent planet. Like maybe you could get some kind of crazy life as we don't know it, but that's not what Sitchin claims at all. Sitchin claims that they are human-like beings who embedded their DNA in early hominids to make humanity. The odds of alien life having DNA similar enough to be combined with humans notwithstanding, this just can't happen on the planet that Sitchin himself describes, which also can't possibly exist as he describes it. And yet, that's not all that's wrong here. We have an understanding of 4 different origin points for human states: the Mesopotamians, Egypt, China, and the Indus Valley civilization in northern India. If the Anunnaki made the Sumerian civilization, which you'll note is only one of the 4 I just mentioned, what about those others? Sitchin actually does have an answer for this, which is that every civilization actually comes from the Sumerians, and every language is a descendant of Sumerian. This is not true in the slightest. Sumer, Egypt, China, and the Indus Valley all rose from different cultures that had long since diverged, and the Sumer language isn't even related to the languages that surround it, much less every language in the world. Again, it's a language isolate like Basque, meaning it's as far from what Sitchin claims as possible. Furthermore, why are they coming to the Earth to mine gold? Putting aside the idea that aliens have the same attraction to gold as we do, since it is useful in some electronics, we just don't have that much gold on our planet relative to the grand scale of our solar system. Go mine Ceres or the asteroid belt or something. You'll have a much better time of it. You wouldn't need to make a genetically engineered slave race to do all the work. It'd be much simpler for you. Speaking of genetic engineering, if we were hybridized with aliens from an entirely separate planet, we would fucking know it. We have decoded the human genome, and we know that we are almost 100% similar to the rest of the life on the planet. Everything on the planet we are like 90-something% similar to. It is crazy. There's absolutely no room for alien hybridization at all. Okay. One more nitpick before we move on. How would the Sumerians know about Pluto or any of the planets beyond Jupiter? Sitchin claims they count them as planets, but astronomical technology at the time could not have seen those planets. Remember, we only barely discovered Pluto in 1930. So they would have to have been informed by their spacefaring deities, right? Well, then why do they consider the moon and the sun to be planets? Surely these deities would know the difference, right? And even if they didn't make a distinction in their culture for some reason, why didn't they tell the Sumerians about all the other moons in the solar system, which they would have had to have considered planets in that theory? The 12th planet? More like the 305th planet! Although, actually there's like 5 dwarf planets in our solar system like Pluto, and since they count Pluto, we'd count the other 4 as well, so 12th planet? More like 309th planet! It's even better the second time. And here's the kicker. The Sumerians wrote down their astronomical findings, and we know from their own goddamn writings that they only knew about 5 planets. Case fucking closed. Okay. But all these are just basic debunks. The real problem here is the root problem of the ancient alien phenomenon. This mythological literalism that completely misses the point of the stories it attempts to turn into a weapon of mass profits off of a very gullible people. Even more so, these types also push some very Eurocentric ideology. Oh, it turns out some aliens descended to Mesopotamia, and they made the closest earliest civilization to Europe. And so everything else is just derivative from that. Wow, that's crazy. To be honest, Sitchin, at least in this book, is not nearly the worst as far as that goes. You could just look at von Daniken's view on Native Americans to see how much worse it can get. But his work feeds into the same well. People reading the 12th Planet were certainly reading Chariot of the Gods, and both of them heavily influenced what people see today on Ancient Aliens, which is still running for some godforsaken reason. They also get pushed by people like David Icke, who claims the world is run to this day by the Anunnaki, who are reptilian bloodsuckers who quite frequently happen to be Jewish for some reason. I wonder why. Shows, public figures, and books like this not only push a white supremacist ideology that robs non-white people of their cultural heritage to assign it to aliens, or sometimes outright point the finger at minorities as alien, they also erode our society's consensus on reality, which has led to our modern post-truth society. And so Sitchin sits as a reference in the pile of pseudo-historians and conspiracy theorists, as a well to draw upon like von Daniken before him. And so Konami did draw upon him to create Nēbiru, right? Well, while Sitchin's Nēbiru did crash into Earth, that's generally not what people remember from the 12th planet. It's mostly the Anunnaki stuff, like in the 2010 TV show Scooby-Doo Mystery Incorporated. No, the planet crashing is going to require us to take one step further down this rabbit hole. Chapter 4, Nancy Lieder and Zeta Talk. In 1995, a website appeared warning of an impending doomsday. This website, simply named Zeta Talk, described a Planet X 4 times the size of the planet Earth on a path to devastate human civilization. The gravitational pull would halt the rotation of the Earth for 5.9 days, and the magnetic attraction of the planet would cause a pole shift and disrupt the Earth's core and displace the Earth's crust. These changes to the planet would create a massive wave of natural disasters, much like climate change. But don't worry, that one isn't real. It's just underwater volcanoes in Indonesia. 400 plus tornadoes a week, whirlpools in the ocean, and dangerous coasts. The world would be in ruins. And when would this cataclysm occur? In the near future year of 2003. You all remember how this all happened in 2003, don't you? Well, of course you don't, because that was the white lie, all caps, to throw the establishment off the trail so they couldn't declare martial law to control the populace. But also, it did happen actually, you just didn't notice because the media and those fascists at NASA covered it up. These aren't even 2 separate statements from Zeta Talk, by the way. Those both appear on the same page explaining what happened in 2003, at the same time. So what the fuck is going on here? Zeta Talk was created by Nancy Lieder, a Wisconsin-born alien conspiracy theorist. While we don't know much about her life beyond what little she reveals on Zeta Talk, we do know that she considers herself a contactee, a term in the UFO community for someone who has interacted with the aliens but hasn't been abducted. According to her, she was contacted as a young girl in the woods of Wisconsin by the Zetas, hence the name of the website. The Zetas are traditional gray-style aliens from the Zeta Reticuli system. Funnily enough, where the much more famous Barney and Betty Hill also claimed their aliens were from several years after their abduction. And about 20 years later, the NSA told an engineer and businessman, Paul Benowitz, through a computer that they supplied him and claimed was a direct line of communication with the aliens, that the aliens were coming from the Zeta Reticuli system. They probably got that idea from the Betty and Barney incident, but Paul was so convinced to the point that he was institutionalized for his alien paranoia that the NSA and the Air Force Office of Special Investigations implanted in him, all to keep him, a US citizen, from investigating or being believed about secret weapons tests that he thought were UFOs. Our tax dollars could pay for that, but not for universal healthcare or school lunches. Neat! Also, a little extra fun fact here, the Zeta Reticuli system doesn't even have any planets. It's just a binary star system with no planets at all. Where are the aliens? On the surface of the star? Anyways, these much more peaceful, apparently sun-dwelling Zetans supposedly implanted Zetan genetic material into Nancy's brain to create a telepathic communication center because she had been chosen to be the communicator. And just a note here, all of her writings say a communicator or our communicator, but not the communicator. But there's only ever been one, as far as I can tell, which makes sense considering that every extraterrestrial encounter story is driven by the unique brainscape of each individual contactee or abductee, and thus rarely are any two stories one and the same, at least until they have time to mingle together like Barney and Betty Hills. So while many Zeta believers may exist, none of them experience the Zeta in exactly the same way, and certainly none of them are so bold as to claim the title of communicator alongside their communicator. So as communicator for the Zeta, she was groomed from a young age, and I do mean groomed. If these aliens were real, they would get along well with Drake, that's all I'm saying. They continuously wiped her memory as they had her undergo their hybrid program, where they impregnated her with hybrid species and had her meet a cavalcade of alien life that, funnily enough, sound more like random things you would see in your dreams or in the background of a Star Wars movie than anything we would expect to see in an actual alien. Cockroach Man is just the aliens from Space Hunter Nebula and Godzilla vs. Gigant. Come on! All of this was recovered by Nancy in 1993 through a process called hypnotic recall. Hypnotic recall is a process by which a hypnotherapist, not to be confused with a real therapist, implants false memories into a patient and then pretends that they're real. It's like Inception, but in real life, and much more lame. Hypnotherapy is best known for its use in the Satanic Panic, where it helped convict innocent people for fake satanic child abuse, and also for creating alien encounter stories. Memory is a fragile thing, and these grifters had found that an easy way to make money is to convince you that you remember things that never actually happened, and then get you and your friends back to do it some more. After that, you can write a book on it and make even more money. It turns out that if you have absolutely no morals, the entirety of our society is designed to help you get ahead. Surely that doesn't say anything damning about the capitalist hegemony that we find ourselves in. Because of this manipulation of her own brain, Nancy Leader brought Lowell's Planet X back, and right into the modern day conspiracy culture. It's unlikely that Nancy was reading much of the works of Percival Lowell though. Most likely it came into her brain space through a more general cultural osmosis, particularly of sci-fi films, which is where a lot of alien sightings come from anyways. Isn't it weird after all how you don't really have any UFO sightings before sci-fi writers came up with the idea of them? What a crazy coincidence. She was also definitely reading the 12th Planet, since she often claims that Planet X and the 12th Planet are one and the same. Leader incorporated quite a bit of the book into her website, honestly to the point where Sitchin could probably sue her. Despite this, she doesn't really seem to come away with the same interpretation of the Anunnaki as Sitchin. Her Anunnaki are deeply cruel and capricious, and are currently mining Mars's moon, Phobos. They were the inspiration for Roman culture, most European gods, and the Visigoths for some reason? As in, like, Nancy Leader seems to think that the Visigoths didn't exist and were purely mythological, instead of being the western branch of the Goths. I don't understand what's going on here. She thinks that they were fake. I don't know. Nancy also explains that the Anunnaki need the gold that they mine to retain heat and light, trying to explain Sitchin's terrible fake planet. Why she so often avoided the word Nibiru while also doing so much work to try and fix Sitchin's work, I do not know. But it's going to be a bit further in the timeline before she switches off of Planet X and starts saying Nibiru. Even after that, the two's works stand in stark contrast with her depiction of the Anunnaki. Regardless, Nancy's Zeta Talk really did inject the idea of a planet approaching Earth directly into the conspiracy theory movement. While she wouldn't ever give a date for Armageddon again, she learned her lesson after all, many others would stake their claim on dates after her. The most common being December 21st, 2012, the end of the Mayan long count calendar. Chapter 5, 2012 and the Mayan long count. If you watched my video on Yugi Doomers, which is hopefully linked here, we covered the 2012 Mayan long count calendar doomsday theory in great detail, so let me give you a less thorough summary here. So the long count calendar is an old calendar that the Mayans barely used that may or may not have had some religious significance, but probably didn't. Americans in the early 2000s found out that the calendar was set to end soon and freaked out, and a series of grifters descended upon them. The History Channel and the early social media boom rocketed this fake doomsday prophecy into full-blown cultural meme, resulting in a pretty mediocre Roland Emmerich movie. And in all of this, Nancy Leader's Planet X became the agent of the Mayan apocalypse and starts to merge with Sitchin's Nēbiru. With a full-blown supernatural social media craze, other psychics and peddlers of woo jumped on the opportunity, many taking a page directly from Nancy Leader. A planet coming to crash into the Earth is a perfect conclusion to a calendar-predicted end of the world after all. The problem is, Planet X is such a lame name. It really calls to mind a cheesy 20th century sci-fi movie, which again, is probably where Nancy got the idea in the first place. We need a new name that links it better to our paranormal grifts. Well, at the same time, the ancient astronaut phenomena was also picking up a lot of steam with Ancient Aliens premiering on the History Channel in 2009. This brought a lot of attention to Zechariah Sitchin and Nibiru. And what a perfect name for a world-ending planet, eh? At this point, it gets hard to track who is influencing who, as so many people hop on the grift train. Not a lot of research has been done on this topic specifically. I'm basically the only person as far as I can tell. There's been a couple of people who have examined the phenomenon as a whole, but not digging into the specifics like this. An important note in this deluge, though, is one Jalila Star.
I'm Jalila Star.
Jalila Star, who I mentioned in the Yu-Gi-Oh! Dooming video, who claimed to be in psychic contact with the Anunnaki on the planet Nibiru, which was going to arrive near Earth again in time with the Mayan calendar, giving us a direct combination of Leader and Sitchin's conspiracies. Thesis plus almost completely unrelated thesis equals synthesis. That's just dialectics, baby. This combination of two pretty contradictory pseudo-realities into one also contradictory reality is a perfect encapsulation of crank magnetism. Basically, conspiratorial and pseudoscientific thinking begets more conspiratorial and pseudoscientific thinking. If you believe in alien visitations, what else could be out there? And if you believe the government is hiding them from you, what else could they be hiding? Since you've already gone past the bounds of Occam's razor and our common understanding of reality, where do you draw the line on what isn't possible? And in a big tent conspiracy like the 2012 phenomenon, you're going to end up with a ton of pseudoscientific ideas mingling and melding together like myths and legends of old. By the way, as a little cap on this, Sitchin disagreed with all of these other conspiracy theories. You see, he thought the planet wouldn't reappear until the 2090s. He thought all these other theories were just silly. It seems he didn't want to be part of that big tent that he partly inspired. Very funny. As for Nancy Leader, she would actually embrace the term Nibiru for her Planet X. As you can see with this Google trend, Nibiru as a mimetic term superseded Planet X during the 2012 phenomenon, so you can actually understand why Nancy, whose career now depended on maintaining relevance in the Doomsday movement, would jump on the term. Especially since she seemingly already considered it to be the 12th planet despite not wanting to use Sitchin's name for it for some reason. Maybe a branding issue?
Today, we're going to talk about why won't the media ever say Nēbiru?
Also, if you're wondering about this huge jump in searches here in 2017, that's from a Nēbiru catechism revival spearheaded by Christian numerologist David Meade. For those who don't know, numerology is finding spiritual and religious meaning through numbers, but Christian numerology actually doesn't involve much numbers, but is instead about arranging the letters of the Bible and turning it into a crossword puzzle. It's actually worse than just a crossword though, because you also skip several lines. This is so stupid that most other Christians hate these guys. Like, it just feels downright lazy to me. So David Meade took that and the geometry of the Giza pyramid for some reason, and somehow came to the conclusion that Nibiru was to arrive in October 2017. Wait, no, actually September 23rd, 2017. Wait, nothing happened in September. Actually, it was October 5th to be precise. Wait, nothing happened then either. April 2018? It's always the same. Doomsday never comes. And then we have this little blip here, which brings us back to Yu-Gi-Oh! Conclusion. And that brings us to 2019, when Nibiru was first printed in the gold sarcophagus tin. Yes, Nibiru was a TCG world premiere, if you didn't know that already, although it was only exclusive for like a few weeks, not even a full month. You might be tempted to say that Nibiru's reference could have only come to print as a TCG exclusive because of all the American cultural background I just went into, but I wouldn't be so sure. According to surveys at the time, a larger percentage of the Japanese population believed in the 2012 Doomsday than the American population, 13% to 12%. Considering that China had a whopping 20% belief rate from this survey, while most fell more in line with America and Japan's numbers, the Maya apocalypse phenomenon was truly global. Whether or not that includes Nibiru is much harder to say. I'm only cautioning coming to any conclusions at this time. Regardless, Nibiru's journey is one of a flight of imagination turned to evil to trick or scare people out of their money and attention, and then being turned back into imagination through one of the most imaginative card games ever made. It once had people counting the planets for answers, and now has people counting their summons. That's its legacy. But what about Theia? Printed in 2024, the dark reflection of Nibiru also has a strange name. What is it referencing? Well, while Nibiru references a fake planet that would crash into Earth, Theia references a real one that actually did. About 4.5 billion years ago, a Mars-sized planet we now call Theia crashed into the Earth. The collision ejected a significant amount of debris that we now call the Moon. It may have even provided a significant amount of our planet's water, although that's still up for debate. The dichotomy between the origins for Nibiru and Theia is downright funny. It's a little strange that the conspiracy theory planet is light attribute and the real one is dark, implying almost a good versus evil dichotomy, but only just. There's only 4 card arts total across the 2 cards and a token though, so mostly it's just a fun little trivia. That kind of cute reference is exactly the kind of thing I love from Yu-Gi-Oh! And part of why it hits like no other game. Hopefully you now also have a greater appreciation for Nibiru and Thea as well. I don't know, a lot of my video essays have like a moral lesson at the end of them that usually boils down to be nicer to people, but this was just like cool, interesting history I wanted to explore. I guess there's like a don't fall for stupid bullshit lesson, but you probably knew that already or you would have stopped watching long ago. Not everything needs a moral, I guess. I'm not making fairy tales here. Anyways, hope you enjoyed this history lesson, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye. Hey there, thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. Got a lot more for you if you want them. Just hit that subscribe button and ring the bell to get notifications. I'd also appreciate if you left me a like and a comment and maybe shared the video around with your friends. You can also follow me on all the usual social media sites. Just check out my website in the description below for more info. My videos are funded by my patrons, Ko-fi subscribers, and YouTube members, whose names you'll see scrolling by in the credits here. For just $1 a month, you too could find yourself here, trapped in my end screen for all eternity. In particular, I'd like to thank Jeremy Coatney, Frog Prince Michael, Fleekill, Haru Hayes, the Almighty Ferret Lord, and Fire Mizumi. A big thanks to all my other patrons and to my little community as a whole. Remember to be kind to yourselves, be kind to others, and have a wonderful whatever time it is for you. Bye-bye.